Good Wednesday, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for January the 4th. Today we are reading together in Genesis chapters 4 and 5. These contain the story of Cain and Abel at the beginning of chapter 4, and then the rest of 4 and the rest of 5 talk about the genealogies of Cain and the line of Seth that come up. There's going to be a number of names throughout these genealogies that we are familiar with. We'll read a few interesting details about them together today. Thanks so much for tuning in and hope that your week is going well. Let me go ahead and get Genesis up on the screen for us. And we'll get to reading again. Just a reminder, anything highlighted in yellow is highlighted as such just to help things pertaining to God. For those that stand out to us within the text, seeing what he does or what people do towards him and such. So keep that in mind as we go throughout the text here. Genesis chapter 4 and verse number 1. Remember, this following the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the garden that we read yesterday in Genesis chapter 3. This is now life outside of the garden. And as we should expect, life outside of the garden is it's a tough place. And there's difficulties that men and women now have to deal with. And unfortunately, some of those difficulties even existed within their own families. So let's read here, Genesis chapter 4 and verse number 1. The man, referring to Adam, was intimate with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. She said, I have had a male child with Yahweh's help. She also gave birth to his son, or to his brother Abel. Now Abel became a shepherd of flocks, but Cain worked the ground. In the course of time, Cain presented some of the land's produce as an offering to Yahweh. And Abel also presented an offering, some of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. Yahweh had regard for Abel and his offering, but he did not have regard for Cain and his offering. Cain was furious, and he looked despondent. Then Yahweh said to Cain, why are you furious? And why do you look despondent? If you do what is right, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's guardian or my brother's keeper? Then he said, what have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed, alienated from the ground that opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood you have shed. If you work the grounds, it will never again give you its yield. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. But Cain answered Yahweh, my punishment is too great to bear, since you are banishing me today from the face of the earth, and I must hide from your presence and become a restless wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me. Then Yahweh replied to him, in that case, whoever kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. And he placed a mark on Cain, so that whoever found him would not kill him. Then Cain went out from Yahweh's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain was intimate with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. Then Cain became the builder of a city, and he named the city Enoch after his son. Irad was born to Enoch. Irad fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methuselah, Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives for himself, one named Adah and the other named Zillah. Adah bore Jabal, who was the first of the nomadic herdsmen. His brother was named Jubal. He was the first of all who played the lyre and the flute. Zillah bore Tubal-Cain, who made all kinds of bronze and iron tools. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, wives of Lamech. Pay attention to my words, for I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is to be avenged 7 times over, then for Lamech it will be 77 times. Adam was intimate with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth. For she said, God has given me another offspring in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. A son was born to Seth also, and he named him Enosh. And at that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. Chapter 5 now of Genesis. This is the document containing the family records of Adam. On the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female. When they were created, he blessed them and called them mankind. Adam was 130 years old when he fathered a son in his likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. Adam lived 800 years after he fathered Seth, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Adam's life lasted 930 years. Then he died. Seth was 105 years old when he fathered Enosh. Seth lived 807 years after he fathered Enosh, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Seth's life lasted 912 years. Then he died. Enosh was 90 years old when he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived 815 years after he fathered Kenan, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Enosh's life lasted 905 years. Then he died. Kenan was 70 years old when he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived 840 years after he fathered Mahalalel, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Kenan's life lasted 910 years. Then he died. Mahalalel was 65 years old when he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived 830 years after he fathered Jared, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Mahalalel's life lasted 895 years. Then he died. Jared was 162 years old when he fathered Enoch. Jared lived 800 years after he fathered Enoch, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Jared's life lasted 962 years. Then he died. Enoch was 65 years old when he fathered Methuselah. And after he fathered Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and fathered other sons and daughters. So Enoch's life lasted 365 years. Enoch walked with God, then he was not there because God took him. Methuselah was 187 years old when he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived 782 years after he fathered Lamech, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Methuselah's life lasted 969 years. Then he died. Lamech was 182 years old when he fathered a son, and he named him Noah, saying, "This one will bring us relief from the agonizing labor of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." Lamech lived 595 years after he fathered Noah, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Lamech's life lasted 777 years, and he died. Noah was 500 years old when he fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And that is Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 5. When everything about these two texts put together, they again just progress the story on from what we've already seen in the text so far. We have chapter 1, the creation, chapter 2, a retelling of the creation from the specific angle of mankind being the focus, chapter 3 being mankind's failure and their expulsion from the garden. And now we see some of the activity outside of the garden and how mankind is going to continue to progress. Unfortunately, what we have here is hatred. We have murder that is fueled by hatred. It's fueled by jealousy and selfishness. And really, again, if we think about the questions that we ask ourselves in these texts, the ones that I shared with you from Mr. King's writing, this really gets me to thinking about helps us to see ourselves as we really are, and what we are individuals who really we're selfish. That is our main issue. Our main issue is selfishness, self-centeredness. It is focusing on self to the detriment of others. It's focusing on self to the ignoring of God as the issue in the garden in chapter 3. It continues being an issue even today. It was an issue for Cain. Cain, instead of focusing on himself and doing what he needed to do in order to gain God's approval and to offer something that God would have regard for, he took out his anger and frustration on his brother Abel. Well, what I want to note here is, again, this helps us to see ourselves, because what we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 is that there's no temptation that comes upon us that is not common, that is not uncommon to man. Same issue happens here, that here within the text there's selfishness that's at the root of it, but also we need to note that there was a way of escape. There was a warning here given directly by God to Cain to not give in to the temptation that was crouching at the door. Don't let it in. It's going to cause trouble. But he didn't take the way of escape. He didn't take the warning. He didn't listen to God. And unfortunately, what we have here then is the murder, the first murder that is recorded for us within Scripture. And unfortunately, this kicked off a lineage of just sin and rebellion against God. Even after Cain leaves, he doesn't continue to wander the earth as God told him to, but he instead decides to build a city. And then from his lineage comes a number of wicked people. Lamech is obviously the worst of it. He follows in the ways of Cain. He is a murderer. He's a womanizer, it seems, and he just overall bad person. He certainly does not fit into the form of those who discusses in chapter 4, verse 26, who began to call on the name of the Lord, who began to worship God and sacrifice to him. Now, those within the lineage of Seth would be those who would do that instead. Especially Enoch is someone that's mentioned here who never died. He walked with God. He had fellowship with God. He was a friend of God, and God just took him one day. What an incredible thing that would be to have that happen to you. But again, the emphasis there is the fact that he walked with God, whereas Cain ignored God. Cain just brushed off God's warning for what he needed to do. Here we have someone who had fellowship with God, and this shows us that the two choices have been there from the beginning. We can reject God, or we can embrace God and walk with him. Whenever you reject God, horrible things happen. Horrible consequences are incurred, and people suffer for that. But whenever people walk with God, there's blessing that comes with walking with God, and that certainly should be something that we desire to do as well. So that's really the takeaway thought for us today. Again, reading this text helps us to see who we are. Which one are we? Are we more like Cain, or are we more like Enoch? Are we rejecting God? Are we resisting God? Are we rebelling against God through our actions? Or are we people who walk with God, who desire his guidance, and who are going to honor him in our lives? Again, we are created in the image of God to reflect his wonderful attributes and to be people, again, that are in his likeness. Are we doing that like Enoch? Or are we rejecting that and being like Cain, being a broken mirror that God looks at? He looks at us, he does not see his image. He does not see his likeness. We need to be more like Enoch, that whenever God saw Enoch, he saw his likeness, he saw his image. He was so pleased with him that he took him without him even dying. Which one are we like? Are we like Cain, or are we like Enoch? The choice is ours. Hopefully we make good choices each and every day that can help us to be more like the people of God that he would have us to be. I appreciate so much you tuning in for this reading on this Wednesday. We will be back at it again tomorrow. Let me double check my schedule here. We'll be reading chapter 6 tomorrow on Thursday. Be reading Genesis chapter 6, be reading about the flood. And then on Friday, we will get the 2 flood chapters 7 and 8 knocked out on Friday. Again, thanks so much for tuning in to this reading today. We'll be gathering tonight for our Bible studies at 7 p.m. Very much looking forward to seeing everyone there. Hope that you've had a great start to the week in this new year. And I appreciate so much you tuning into our Bible readings so far. Please feel free to share with your friends. Send them the link to the YouTube channel if they would like to read along with us in Scripture this year. Again, thanks for taking time to read along in the Bible with me today. Hope you'll do it again tomorrow. Take care. God bless.